The deep space sensors of the Zephyrian hegemony detected the small blue planet on a routine patrol mission. Commander Vexithara stood on the bridge of her massive ship, looking at the readings with mild interest. Another primitive world with basic radio signals and crude satellite technology. The third planet from a yellow star in what the locals called the Sol system. How many intelligent species on the surface? She asked her science officer. Just one, Commander. They call themselves humans. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level is very basic. They have not even achieved faster than light travel yet. Vexithara nodded. This would be easy. In her 300 years of service to the hegemony, she had overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. The process was always the same. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, and integrate the new species into the empire as workers or soldiers. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the size of the Zephyrian fleet. Prepare the standard ultimatum broadcast, she ordered, and bring the fleet into formation. I want these humans to see exactly what they are facing. The Zephyrian fleet was massive. 300 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to enormous dreadnoughts that stretched for miles. Each ship was equipped with weapons that could level entire cities. The largest ships carried enough firepower to crack a planet's surface. No primitive species had ever resisted when faced with such overwhelming power. As the fleet moved into Earth's outer solar system, Vexithara reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity. They were a fractured species, divided into hundreds of nations that constantly fought among themselves. They had recently emerged from a global conflict that killed millions of their own kind. Their technology was primitive. They still used chemical rockets to reach space and nuclear weapons for warfare. Perfect, she thought. Divided and primitive. This will be over in days. The ultimatum broadcast went out on every human communication frequency simultaneously. Radio, television, internet, satellite phones. Every device capable of receiving a signal carried the same message. The holographic image of Vexithara appeared on screens across Earth, speaking in perfect English, Chinese, Spanish, and dozens of other human languages. People of Earth, her voice echoed in homes, offices, and government buildings around the world. I am High Commander Vexithara of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. The image shifted to show the massive alien fleet hanging in space beyond Pluto. Ship after ship filled the view, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. The sheer size of the fleet made Earth's most powerful nuclear submarines look like toys. You have 72 of your hours to surrender unconditionally, Vexithara continued. Your governments will transfer all authority to hegemony administrators. Your military forces will lay down their weapons. Your people will accept their new role as citizens of the empire. The broadcast then showed holographic recordings from other conquered worlds. Cities in ruins, their buildings reduced to rubble by alien weapons. Survivors kneeling before Zephyrian banners, their heads bowed in defeat. Children working in alien factories, their eyes empty of hope. This is the fate of those who resist, Vexithara's voice explained as the images played. But those who surrender peacefully are treated well. You will be fed, housed, and given meaningful work within the empire. Your children will receive education and training. Your culture will be preserved in our archives. The message ended with a countdown timer appearing on every screen. 72 hours. Then the broadcasts cut to static. On Earth, chaos erupted immediately. In major cities, people fled their homes and crowded the highways trying to escape. Stock markets crashed within minutes. Some religious groups declared it the end times and gathered in churches to pray. Others looted stores and fought in the streets. But in the hidden bunkers and secure facilities around the world, a different kind of reaction was taking place. Emergency meetings convened in every major capital. World leaders who had been enemies just hours before now found themselves facing a common threat that made their previous conflicts seem like children's games. In New York, when Secretary General Maria Santos stared at the alien message playing on repeat on her office screen. She was a small woman with graying hair, but her eyes held the determination of someone who had survived 3 wars and a dozen political crises. She picked up her secure phone and began making calls. Get me the President of the United States, the Premier of China, the President of Russia, and the Prime Minister of the European Federation, she told her assistant. Emergency session in 1 hour. In Beijing, Admiral Chen Wei of the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition was already in motion. The coalition had been created in secret just 5 years earlier. after Earth's radio telescopes detected artificial signals from deep space. A small group of world leaders had quietly agreed that if aliens ever came to Earth, humanity needed to be ready. Activate all hidden facilities, Chen ordered his staff. Deploy the orbital platforms, and send the signal to wake up the Mars colony. Most of Earth's population had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this day. Hidden in asteroids and disguised as space junk, dozens of weapon platforms had been slowly built and positioned throughout the solar system. On Mars, a secret colony of 50,000 people had been working for years to establish manufacturing facilities and mining operations. The public face of Earth's response came from the emergency UN session. Representatives from every major nation gathered in the Security Council chamber, their faces grim. Outside, protesters demanded immediate surrender. Inside, the debate was fierce. "We cannot fight them," argued the representative from Germany. "Did you see the size of their fleet? We would be throwing away billions of lives for nothing. And if we surrender, what happens to us?" countered the representative from Brazil. "Did you see those images of conquered worlds? Children working as slaves? Is that the future we want for humanity?" Secretary General Santos listened to the arguments for hours. Some nations wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight to the last man. A few suggested trying to negotiate for better terms. Finally, she called for quiet. "We have 18 hours left to decide," she said. "Whatever we choose together. If we surrender, we all surrender. If we fight, we all fight." The vote was close. 47 nations voted to fight. 43 voted to surrender. 12 abstained. Santos cast the deciding vote. As the deadline approached, Admiral Chen coordinated the final preparations. Hidden factories on Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt worked around the clock to produce weapons and ships. The orbital defense platforms powered up their systems for the first time. Volunteers from every nation reported to secret military bases. The response was recorded in a simple room in the UN building. Secretary General Santos sat at a plain desk looking directly into the camera. Behind her hung the flag of Earth, a simple blue circle on a white background that had been designed years earlier for this exact moment. "Commander Vexthara," she began, her voice steady and calm. "We have received your ultimatum and considered it carefully. On behalf of the people of Earth, I give you our answer." She paused, looking directly into the camera, as if she could see through space to the alien commander watching. "We decline your offer. We will not surrender our world, our freedom, or our children to your empire. Please leave our solar system immediately. If you choose to attack us, we will defend ourselves with everything we have." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, just as the alien ultimatum had been. Across Earth, people watched their leader's simple, direct refusal. Some cheered. Others wept. Many prayed. On the bridge of her flagship, Commander Vexthara watched the human response with disbelief. In 300 years and 47 conquests, no species had ever refused her ultimatum. Not one. She looked at her officers, seeing the same confusion in their faces. Her science officer checked his instruments twice before speaking. "Commander, our analysis shows they have no chance of victory. Their weapons are primitive. Their ships are few and small. Why would they choose to fight?" Vexithara stared at the blue planet hanging in space below them. Something was wrong here. Species that faced certain death usually surrendered. It was logical. It was natural. It was what every intelligent race did when faced with overwhelming odds. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we do not understand these humans as well as we thought." The 72 hours passed like a countdown to doom. On Earth, some people spent their last free hours with family. Others worked frantically in hidden military bases. Many simply watched the sky, waiting for death to rain down from space. Commander Vexithara stood on her bridge as the deadline expired. She had expected a last-minute surrender message, perhaps from human leaders begging for mercy. Instead, there was only silence from the blue planet below. "They must be in shock," her tactical officer suggested. "Perhaps they do not believe we will actually attack." Vexithara nodded. It was time to demonstrate the price of defiance. Begin standard intimidation bombardment. Target their major military installations. Make it clear that resistance is futile. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with precise, devastating strikes. Orbital weapons platforms that had been tracking human military bases for days now unleashed their power. Beams of superheated plasma reached down from space like the finger of an angry god. The first target was a large military base in the American state of Nevada. The plasma beam struck with the force of a small nuclear weapon, turning sand into glass and concrete into vapor. The base vanished in a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. But as the light faded, something unexpected happened. Instead of the silent crater Vexithara expected to see, her sensors detected movement. Blast doors hidden deep underground were opening, and from them emerged something that should not have existed: human spaceships. They were small and crude compared to Zephyrian vessels, but they were real. Dozens of them rose from the destroyed base, their engines glowing with nuclear fire. They moved in formation, heading directly toward the alien fleet. "How is this possible?" Vexithara demanded. Intelligence reports said they had no combat spacecraft. Her science officer worked frantically at his console. "Commander, I am detecting similar launches from 17 other locations. The humans have been hiding a space fleet. More ships emerged from hidden bases around the world. They launched from underground facilities in Russia, China, Brazil, and Australia. Some were sleek fighters that moved like angry wasps. Others were larger vessels bristling with crude but dangerous weapons. But the biggest surprise came from space itself. As the human ships climbed toward the alien fleet, objects that had been floating motionless in Earth's orbit suddenly came to life. Satellites that had appeared dead for years powered up their systems. Chunks of space debris revealed themselves to be hidden weapon platforms. Admiral Chenwei commanded the human response from a secret base on the far side of the moon. He watched his screens as humanity's hidden fleet revealed itself to the galaxy for the first time. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," he broadcast to the scattered human ships. "Today we show these aliens what happens when you threaten Earth. Attack Formation Alpha. Target their smaller ships first." The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1, but they had advantages the aliens did not expect. They knew the local space around Earth better than the invaders. They had been planning this moment for years, and they were fighting for their homes, their families, and their species' survival. The first human ship to reach the alien fleet was a modified cargo vessel called the Mumbai Express. It had been built to carry supplies to the Mars colony, but now it carried something else: a nuclear warhead larger than any weapon Earth had ever built. Captain Priya Sharma sat in the pilot's seat, watching the massive alien dreadnought grow larger on her screen. Her ship shook as alien weapons fired at her, but she held her course steady. Behind her, the crew worked to arm their improvised weapon. "This is Captain Sharma to all human forces," she broadcast on an open channel. "Remember us." The Mumbai Express struck the alien ship's hull and detonated. The explosion tore a hole in the dreadnought's side the size of a football stadium. Atmosphere and alien bodies were sucked into space as the massive ship shuddered and began to list. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships that were outgunned and outmaneuvered made desperate suicide runs against alien vessels. They used tactics no civilized species would consider: ramming attacks, nuclear mines disguised as disabled ships, and weapons that were as dangerous to the user as the target. The aliens had superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy willing to die to take them down. Zephyrian ship captains found themselves hesitating, trying to understand why their opponents would deliberately destroy themselves for small tactical gains. Commander Vexithara watched in growing horror as her orderly battle plan fell apart. 3 of her cruisers were severely damaged or destroyed. Dozens of smaller ships had been lost to human suicide attacks, and the humans kept coming. "Commander," her tactical officer reported, "the humans are using nuclear weapons as close-range explosives. They are sacrificing their own ships to damage ours." "That is tactically insane," Vexithara replied. "No rational species would waste resources that way." But even as she spoke, another human ship slammed into one of her destroyers. The explosion lit up the space around Earth like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. The tide of the battle began to turn when the humans revealed their final surprise. From the asteroid belt came a new group of ships, larger and more heavily armed than the others. These were the vessels built in secret on Mars and in hidden asteroid bases. The flagship of this new fleet was called the Defiance. It was twice the size of any previous human spacecraft and mounted weapons that had been reverse-engineered from alien signals intercepted over the years. Admiral Chen transferred his command to the Defiance as it entered the battle. "All ships focus fire on the alien command vessel," he ordered. "Cut off the head of the snake." Dozens of human ships converged on Vexthera's flagship. They came from all directions, using the wreckage of destroyed vessels as cover. Their weapons were primitive but effective at close range. Vexthera found herself fighting for her life as human weapons hammered her ship's shields. Her vessel was built to withstand attacks from other Zephyrian ships, not the chaotic close-range brawl the humans had created. All ships, withdraw to safe distance, she ordered. Maintain orbital bombardment from long range. But as the alien fleet pulled back, they discovered another problem. The humans had not just hidden ships and weapons. They had been preparing for a siege. Hidden facilities throughout the solar system began activating. Automated factories on asteroids started producing new ships and weapons. Mining operations that had appeared to be abandoned revealed themselves to be fully operational. Even the civilian space stations around Earth began launching attacks using improvised weapons. The most shocking discovery came when alien scouts tried to establish a base on Earth's moon. They found it already occupied by thousands of humans living in underground cities that had been built in secret over decades. How long have they been preparing for this? Vexthera asked her intelligence officer. Unknown, Commander, but it appears they have been building a hidden military infrastructure for many years, perhaps decades. As the first day of fighting ended, both sides counted their losses. The humans had lost 60% of their initial fleet, along with thousands of brave men and women who had died defending their world. But they had also inflicted serious damage on 3 alien ships and forced the entire Zephyrian fleet to withdraw. More importantly, they had sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. For the first time in the hegemony's long history, a primitive species had not only refused to surrender, but had actually hurt their attackers. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display showing the alien fleet's new position. They had pulled back beyond the orbit of Mars, out of range of Earth's defenses, but still close enough to maintain a blockade. "They think they can starve us out," he said to his staff. "They think we will surrender when we run out of food and supplies." His communications officer looked up from her console. "Sir, we are receiving surrender offers from 17 different human governments. They want to negotiate with the aliens." Chen shook his head. Some humans would always choose the easy path, even when it led to slavery. But they were not speaking for all of humanity. "Send this message to all human forces, hidden bases, and civilian populations," he ordered. "We have bloodied their nose, but this is just the beginning. They want to besiege us. Let them try. We have been preparing for this longer than they know." On the alien flagship, Commander Vexthera stared at the blue planet that had defied her. She had called for reinforcements, but they would take months to arrive. Until then, she would have to maintain the blockade and hope the humans would see reason. But something about the human response troubled her. Their tactics were unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. They fought like desperate animals, willing to die for the smallest advantage. They had prepared for war in secret while appearing peaceful on the surface. Most disturbing of all, they had looked at her overwhelming fleet and chosen to fight anyway. What kind of species did that? What kind of species would rather die than submit? She was beginning to suspect that she had badly underestimated these humans, and that this conquest would be unlike any other in the hegemony's long history. 6 months had passed since the first battle, and Commander Vexthera was beginning to understand that she had made a terrible mistake. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare that grew worse with each passing day. The siege of Earth was not going according to plan. Instead of weakening, the humans seemed to be getting stronger. Their hidden factories worked day and night, producing new ships and weapons. Every week brought fresh attacks from unexpected directions. "Commander," her intelligence officer reported during the morning briefing, "the humans have completed another manufacturing facility on the asteroid Ceres. Our scouts report at least 50 new ships under construction." There, Vexthera studied the tactical display with growing frustration. Red dots marked human installations throughout the solar system. They had bases on Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of asteroids. Each one was defended and contributing to the human war effort. "How are they building so quickly?" she demanded. "Our projections showed it would take them years to expand their industrial capacity." "They appear to have been preparing for this conflict much longer than we initially believed," her science officer replied. "Some of these installations show signs of construction dating back decades." The humans had indeed been busy. What the aliens saw as hasty wartime construction was actually the culmination of a 50-year plan. Ever since humans had first detected artificial radio signals from space, a secret coalition of Earth's governments had been preparing for the day when aliens would come calling. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of New Geneva Base, hidden deep inside an asteroid near Jupiter. Around him, technicians coordinated the defense of humanity's scattered holdings. The base had been built in complete secrecy over 15 years, disguised as a mining operation. "Status report on Operation Swarm," he requested. His aide consulted her tablet. 43 new ships completed this week. The Martian shipyards are ahead of schedule, and the Europa facility has successfully tested the new plasma cannon design. Chen nodded with satisfaction. The human strategy was simple: build ships faster than the aliens could destroy them. But it was more than just numbers. Each new ship incorporated lessons learned from previous battles. Human technology was evolving rapidly, driven by desperation and necessity. The aliens were learning that humans were disturbingly creative when their survival was at stake. They had weaponized everything from cargo containers to children's toys. Mining ships became missile platforms. Communication satellites turned into surveillance networks. Even civilian passenger liners were converted into troop transports and supply vessels. But the humans' most unsettling innovation was psychological warfare. They had studied the alien broadcasts and reverse-engineered the communication protocols. Now human messages flooded Zephyrian ships on all frequencies. The messages were strange and disturbing. Sometimes they were human music, haunting songs about loss and determination that somehow made alien crew members feel uneasy. Other times they were poetry about war and sacrifice that seemed to get under the skin of Zephyrian soldiers. "Commander," the communications officer on Vexthera's flagship reported, "the humans are broadcasting again. This time it appears to be children singing." Vexthera listened to the transmission with confusion. Young human voices sang a simple song about their home planet, their love for their families, and their determination to be free. It should have been meaningless. Instead, she found it oddly disturbing. The song was called "We Shall Not Go Gentle," and it had been written specifically for this war. It spoke of light and darkness, of fighting against impossible odds, and of refusing to surrender even in the face of death. The children singing it had been born after the war began, in hidden bases throughout the solar system. "Turn off the transmission," Vexthera ordered, "and jam all human communication frequencies." But the humans had learned to use the aliens' own communication networks against them. They sent viruses through captured alien equipment, planted false information in Zephyrian data systems, and even managed to hack into some ship computers to display human propaganda on alien screens. The situation became critical when reinforcements finally arrived. War Marshal Kethamor brought 500 additional ships and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. He was older than Vexthera, with scars from a dozen campaigns, and he had never failed to conquer a world. "Commander Vexthera," he said during their first meeting, "your reports make little sense. How can a primitive species hold out against the might of the hegemony for 6 months? The humans are not like other species we have encountered," Vexthera replied carefully. "They appear to have been preparing for invasion for decades. Their industrial capacity is far beyond what our initial surveys indicated." Kethamor studied the tactical reports with growing irritation. "Preparation means nothing against superior firepower. You have been too cautious. It is time to show these humans the true cost of defiance." The War Marshal implemented what was called Protocol 7, the systematic destruction of human civilian infrastructure. Starting with communication satellites and moving to population centers, the alien fleet began methodically destroying everything that kept human civilization functioning. The bombardment of Luna City was meant to break human morale once and for all. The moon base housed 50,000 civilians, scientists, engineers, families who had volunteered to live in space to support the war effort. When the alien plasma beam struck, the entire complex was vaporized in seconds. Kethamor expected this massive loss of life to finally convince the humans to surrender. Instead, it had the opposite effect. The death of Luna City transformed the conflict from a military war into something far more dangerous, a war of extinction. Within hours of the bombardment, every human civilian facility became a military target. Research stations armed themselves with improvised weapons. Merchant ships began attacking alien scouts with ramming maneuvers. Even children's schools started producing components for weapons and explosives. The change was most visible on Earth itself. Despite the alien blockade, resistance cells emerged in every major city. They could not reach the alien fleet directly, but they found other ways to fight back. When Zephyrian landing parties tried to establish forward bases on Earth's surface, they discovered that the entire planet had become hostile. Human civilians attacked with everything from kitchen knives to homemade explosives. Children as young as 10 planted booby traps using household chemicals. Elderly grandparents became suicide bombers, taking alien soldiers with them when they died. The most disturbing development was the human families who lived on generation ships, massive civilian vessels designed to establish colonies on distant worlds. After Luna City's destruction, these ships stopped fleeing and started fighting. Captain Sarah Martinez commanded the generation ship New Horizons, home to 20,000 civilians, including her own 2 young children. When alien scouts tried to board her vessel, she made a decision that horrified the aliens. "All civilians to battle stations," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Today we fight for our children's future." The New Horizons had been designed as a peaceful colony ship, but desperate humans could turn anything into a weapon. The hydroponics bays became chemical weapon factories. The engineering sections produced improvised explosives. Even the children's playrooms were converted into ammunition storage. When the alien boarding party finally broke through the ship's hull, they found themselves fighting an entire community. Mothers fired improvised weapons while singing lullabies to babies strapped to their backs. Teenagers used maintenance robots as remote-controlled bombs. Grandfathers taught children how to make poison gas from cleaning supplies. The aliens retreated in confusion and horror. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy where every single member of the population was willing to fight and die rather than surrender. What kind of species fights with their children? One Zephyrian officer asked after the boarding attempt failed. "A species that prefers death to slavery," Captain Martinez replied over the open communication channel. "A species that will never stop fighting as long as one of us draws breath." War Marshal Kethamore found himself facing a problem that had no solution in Zephyrian military doctrine. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. Every base they destroyed was rebuilt within weeks. Every ship they sank was replaced by 2 more. Every civilian they killed seemed to inspire 10 more humans to take up arms. Worse, the human tactics were spreading beyond Earth. Other conquered species in the hegemony had heard about the human resistance. Some were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about why they had surrendered so easily when these primitive humans refused to give up. "Sir," Kethamore's intelligence officer reported, "we are receiving disturbing reports from the Altair system. The subject species there are asking why they should continue to serve the hegemony when humans are proving that resistance is possible." "And from the Centauri colonies," another officer added, "local administrators report increasing unrest among the worker populations. They want to know why humans are allowed to fight when they were forced to surrender." Kethamore realized that the human resistance was becoming more than just a local problem. 1 year into the conflict, the Zephyrian hegemony faced something that had never happened in their 2,000-year history. They were losing a war to a species that should have been conquered in days. War Marshal Kethamore stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. The humans had not just survived the siege, they had grown stronger. Their industrial output now exceeded their pre-war levels. Their fleet was larger than when the conflict began. Most disturbing of all, they were no longer simply defending their home system. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "human reconnaissance ships have been detected in the Ross 128 and Wolf 359 systems. They appear to be mapping our supply routes." Kethamore felt a chill run through his body. The humans were no longer content to simply survive. They were preparing to take the war to the hegemony. The transformation of human society during the war was unprecedented. Every aspect of their civilization had been reorganized around a single goal: victory or death. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no surrender. On Earth, children attended school in the morning and worked in weapons factories in the afternoon. Their textbooks taught mathematics using artillery trajectory problems and chemistry through explosive formulas. Physical education classes included training with military equipment and survival skills. The elderly served as the backbone of the resistance effort. Too old for frontline combat, They became the planners, the strategists, the keepers of knowledge. Grandmothers who had once baked cookies now designed biological weapons. Grandfathers who had gardened for relaxation now cultivated deadly bacteria in hidden laboratories. But it was the teenagers who proved most adaptable to the new reality. Growing up during wartime, they had no memory of peace. They learned to hack alien computer systems as easily as riding bicycles. They built improvised explosives with the same casual skill their parents had once used to assemble furniture. Admiral Chen Wei, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Forces, coordinated the war effort from a mobile command ship that never stayed in one place for more than a few days. The vessel was called the Retribution, and it had been built from salvaged alien technology and human innovation. Status report on Project Pandora, he requested during his daily briefing. His chief of intelligence smiled grimly. Phase 1 is complete, sir. We have successfully infiltrated 47 Zephyrian vessels with our converted personnel. Phase 2 begins next week. Project Pandora was humanity's most ambitious operation yet. Using a combination of psychological manipulation, chemical influence, and carefully planned Stockholm Syndrome tactics, human prisoners had been converting their alien guards to the human cause. The converted aliens then worked to spread the influence to other crew members. The process was slow but effective. It began with human prisoners sharing stories about their homes, their families, and their reasons for fighting. The aliens, isolated from their own families for years of military service, found themselves oddly moved by these tales of love and sacrifice. Then came the subtle introduction of chemicals into the air recycling systems, compounds that made the aliens more emotional and susceptible to suggestion. Combined with human music, poetry, and philosophy, the chemicals gradually broke down the mental conditioning that made Zephyrian soldiers obedient to their empire. The final step was the revelation of the truth about the hegemony, how it enslaved entire species, destroyed cultures, and treated conquest as entertainment. Many Zephyrian soldiers had never questioned their empire's methods. When they finally understood what they had been part of, some chose to join the human cause rather than continue serving a system they now saw as evil. But the humans' most devastating weapon was their refusal to accept any limit on their warfare. They had weaponized everything, their emotions, their deaths, their very existence. Nothing was too sacred to sacrifice for victory. The breaking point came when humans captured their first intact Zephyrian dreadnought. The ship was called the Dominant Will, and it had been crippled during a battle near Jupiter. Instead of destroying the vessel, human engineers managed to board and capture it. What happened next shocked the alien military leadership. The humans didn't just study the captured ship, they improved it. Within weeks, they had reverse-engineered the alien technology and begun producing hybrid weapons that were somehow more effective than the originals. Dr. Elena Vasquez led the human research team studying alien technology. She was a brilliant engineer who had once designed peaceful space habitats. Now she spent her days finding new ways to kill aliens more efficiently. The Zephyrian power systems are actually quite inefficient, she explained to Admiral Chen during a technical briefing. They prioritize reliability over output, but if we modify the plasma flow regulators and increase the magnetic field strength, we can boost weapon power by 30%. What about the risks? Chen asked. Dr. Vasquez shrugged. The modified systems have a 15% chance of catastrophic failure. But when they work, they can punch through alien shields like they were made of paper. This perfectly summarized the human approach to technology. They were willing to accept massive risks for small advantages. Alien engineers built systems that would work reliably for centuries. Human engineers built systems that might explode, but would take the enemy with them. The modified human-alien hybrid ships were terrifying to face in battle. They moved with human unpredictability while packing firepower that could threaten much larger alien vessels. Worse, the humans had learned to mass-produce them using automated factories throughout the solar system. The most infamous human vessel was the suicide ship Vengeance. It had been built from the wreckage of dozen destroyed ships, held together with determination and welding compound. The ship's only purpose was to ram alien vessels at maximum speed while detonating its entire arsenal. Captain James Murphy commanded the Vengeance with a crew of volunteers who knew they would not survive their first mission. They were veterans whose families had been killed in alien bombardments. soldiers who had lost too many friends, and civilians who simply refused to let the aliens win. "This is Captain Murphy to all human forces," he broadcast as his ship accelerated toward the alien fleet. "Today we show these invaders what happens when you threaten Earth's children. Remember us and make them pay." The Vengeance struck a Zephyrian cruiser at nearly light speed. The explosion was visible from 3 solar systems away. When the light faded, both ships were gone, along with 2 other alien vessels that had been caught in the blast radius. Such tactics horrified the Zephyrian military. They had fought many wars, but always with some concept of acceptable losses and reasonable objectives. The humans seemed to have no concept of unacceptable losses. They would sacrifice anything, ships, resources, lives, for the smallest tactical advantage. The situation deteriorated further when human infiltration teams began operating inside Zephyrian space. Using captured alien ships and converted crew members, human special forces launched raids deep into hegemony territory. These operations had multiple purposes. They gathered intelligence on alien weaknesses, rescued human prisoners, and spread propaganda to other conquered species. But their most important function was psychological. They proved that the mighty Zephyrian hegemony could be hurt in its own territory. Commander Sarah Kim led the most successful infiltration mission. Her team used a captured alien courier ship to penetrate deep into hegemony space, reaching the industrial world of Kepler Prime. The planet housed factories that produced weapons for the alien fleet. Instead of attacking the factories directly, Kim's team did something more devastating. They released thousands of small devices throughout the planet's information networks. The devices began broadcasting human music, human stories, and human propaganda to every screen and speaker on the world. The conquered species on Kepler Prime had lived under Zephyrian rule for 3 centuries. They had forgotten what freedom looked like. But the human broadcasts reminded them of what they had lost. They learned about a species that refused to surrender, that fought with their children and died with songs on their lips. Within days, riots broke out in Kepler Prime's industrial centers. The conquered workers began sabotaging production lines and attacking their alien overseers. The rebellion spread to other worlds as human propaganda broadcasts reached more conquered populations. "Sir," Kethmore's intelligence chief reported, "we now have active rebellions on 17 worlds. The conquered species are using tactics copied from human resistance manuals. They are specifically citing the human example as inspiration for their actions." The war marshal realized that the human war had become something far more dangerous than a local conflict. It was becoming a galaxy-wide revolution against the entire concept of the hegemony. The final straw came when humans managed to infiltrate one of the most secure facilities in Zephyrian space, the intelligence center on the capital world itself. A team of converted aliens and human infiltrators penetrated the facility and stole detailed information about hegemony military deployments, conquered worlds, and internal politics. But they didn't just steal the information. They replaced it with something else: detailed plans for rebellion customized for each conquered species. Biological weapons designed for specific alien physiologies. Communication. 2 years after first contact, the Zephyrian hegemony was collapsing. What had begun as a routine conquest of a primitive world had become an existential nightmare that threatened the very foundation of their empire. High Commander Vex Thara, now a broken and desperate figure, stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship as it limped away from the Sol system. Around her, the remnants of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy struggled to maintain formation. Half the ships showed battle damage. The other half carried crews who could no longer be trusted. "Commander," her communications officer reported, "we are receiving the recall order from High Command. All fleets are to return to core hegemony space immediately." Vexithara nodded wearily. The recall had been inevitable. The human war had spread like a plague throughout the galaxy, inspiring rebellions on dozens of worlds and threatening the stability of the entire empire. But as her fleet prepared to withdraw, she received one final transmission from the humans. It was broadcast on all frequencies, making sure every Zephyrian ship would hear it clearly. "Commander Vexithara," came the voice of Admiral Chen Wei. "This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Forces. We have a message for your empire." The transmission included video footage from across human space. It showed massive shipyards working at full capacity, producing vessels that combined human determination with captured alien technology. It showed military academies where human children learned strategy and tactics alongside their regular lessons. It showed laboratories where scientists worked to develop new weapons specifically designed to kill Zephyrians. "You came to our system expecting us to surrender," Chen continued. "You thought we were just another primitive species that would bow down to your superior technology. You were wrong." The video shifted to show scenes from throughout the galaxy: worlds in rebellion, Zephyrian installations under attack, conquered species using human-designed weapons and tactics to fight their oppressors. "We have studied your empire, learned your weaknesses, and shared that knowledge with every species you have enslaved. Your 1,000-year reign of terror is ending." As the Zephyrian fleet finally departed the Sol system, they left behind something they had never left before: a completely unconquered enemy. Not only had the humans survived, they had grown stronger. Their industrial capacity now exceeded their pre-war levels. Their military was larger and more advanced than when the conflict began. Most terrifying of all, they had learned to build faster-than-light ships using captured alien technology. Humanity was no longer trapped in a single star system. They could take their war to the galaxy. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar dreadnought, a massive vessel called the Liberation. It had been built using a combination of human engineering and captured Zephyrian technology, then improved with innovations that even the aliens had never considered. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "we have a clear hyperspace route to the Altair system. Our intelligence indicates significant Zephyrian military installations there." Chen looked at the star charts showing the location of hegemony worlds and military bases. For 2 years, humanity had been forced to fight defensively. Now it was time to take the war to the enemy. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump," he ordered. "Today we begin the liberation of the galaxy." The human fleet that departed Earth consisted of 200 ships of various sizes. They were crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth and every human colony in the solar system. Some were veterans of the defense of Earth, others were children who had grown up during the war and knew no other life. But they all shared one characteristic that made them unlike any military force the galaxy had ever seen. They were fighting not just for victory, but for the complete destruction of an empire that threatened their existence. The first target was the Zephyrian military, base on Altair 4. It was a fortress world that controlled 3-star systems and housed the regional fleet headquarters. Intelligence gathered by human infiltrators indicated that it was considered impregnable. The humans proved them wrong in 6 hours. The attack began, with a tactic that had become known throughout the galaxy as the human opening, a coordinated assault by ships willing to sacrifice themselves to achieve their objectives. Suicide vessels packed with nuclear weapons punched through the orbital defenses while the main fleet engaged the garrison. But this was not just about military victory. As the human fleet secured orbit around Altair 4, they began broadcasting to the conquered populations on the planet's surface. The messages were in dozens of languages, adapted for the various species that the Zephyrians had enslaved over the centuries. "People of Altair," the broadcasts began, "we are the humans of Earth. We come to offer you something your oppressors said was impossible: freedom." The broadcasts included detailed instructions for rebellion, technical specifications for improvised weapons, and coordination protocols for resistance networks. They also included something more important: proof that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. Within hours of the human victory, uprisings began on the planet's surface. The conquered species, inspired by the human example and armed with human weapons, rose up against their overseers. The rebellion spread to other worlds in the system as human ships carried the message of liberation from planet to planet. Similar scenes played out across Zephyrian space as human forces struck at military installations. Throughout the Empire, they did not conquer worlds in the traditional sense, and they liberated them, providing the tools and knowledge necessary for each species to free itself. The psychological impact on the Zephyrian military was devastating. Soldiers who had served the Empire for decades began to question everything they had been taught. Some defected to join the growing rebellion. Others simply refused to fight, unwilling to participate in what they now saw as an unjust system. The collapse accelerated when human forces reached the Zephyrian core worlds. These were the planets where the Empire's ruling class lived in luxury, supported by the labor of conquered species. They had never experienced war directly, and were completely unprepared for what humanity brought to their doorstep. The siege of the Zephyrian capital world lasted only 3 days. Not because the humans destroyed the planet's defenses, but because the defenders simply gave up. Faced with an enemy that had already proven they would rather die than surrender, many Zephyrian commanders chose surrender rather than face certain death. But the humans were not interested in ruling a new empire. Instead, they established something unprecedented in galactic history, a confederation of free worlds united only by their shared commitment to preventing any future conquest. Each liberated species was given complete autonomy to govern itself as it chose. The only requirement was that they contribute to the common defense and assist in liberating other enslaved worlds. The Galactic Liberation Front, as it came to be known, grew rapidly as more species chose freedom over oppression. The Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated the galaxy for 2,000 years, collapsed completely within 5 years of first contact with humanity. Some former hegemony worlds chose to join the new confederation. Others simply wanted to be left alone. A few tried to establish their own small empires, but quickly discovered that their neighbors had learned human methods of resistance. The last transmission from the Zephyrian leadership was a message of warning broadcast to any species that might encounter humanity in the future. It was delivered by High Commander Vexithera, now in exile living on a remote world far from her former empire. To any intelligent species receiving this message, she began, her voice hollow with defeat. We offer this warning about the species that calls itself human. The transmission showed images from the human war, ships destroyed in suicide attacks, soldiers who fought to the death rather than surrender, civilians who chose to die rather than submit to conquest. They do not understand surrender. They do not understand defeat. They understand only victory or death, and they have made death itself into a weapon against their enemies. Vexithara's image was older now, marked by years of stress and failure. Her once proud uniform was faded and worn. We expected their submission and received absolute devastation. We thought they were weak because they were divided, but their divisions made them stronger. We thought they were primitive because their technology was simple, but they improved our own technology beyond our understanding. The transmission continued with tactical analyses of human warfare, psychological profiles of human behavior, and detailed accounts of how a single species had brought down the greatest empire in galactic history. Most dangerous of all, they spread their ideas like a plague. Every species they encounter learns their methods, adopts their technologies, and embraces their concept of freedom. They do not conquer, they liberate, and liberation is far more dangerous to an empire than conquest. The message ended with a simple warning that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Avoid the Sol system. Avoid the humans. They are the storm that devours stars, the fire that burns empires to ash. If you value your civilizer protocols that